Good afternoon, everybody. Good morning for those of you in America. We're delighted to welcome you today for ESW's first webinar of 2022. My name is Sam and I work here at eShop World, and I'll be hosting today's session. If you're joining us live, thank you so much for attending. And if you're listening to this recording, then thank you very much for doing so. I'm delighted to say that today we're joined by Martin Newman, the consumer champion, who will be sharing his insights into customer centricity and what does that mean for global e-commerce and how it can be a driver for sales and the profitability of brands. Martin's presentation is going to last for around 30 to 35 minutes. And after this, Natashia Redfern, our sales director at eShop World in the UK, will join us for a 10-minute Q&A session. So please feel free to enter any questions you may have using the Q&A function at the bottom of the screen in this webinar, and we will get to those at the end of the presentation. So without further ado, I'm going to hand over to Martin for our first part of the event. Martin, over to you.
Thank you very much, Sam. Thank you. So I'm going to be talking about thinking big but acting locally and how to leverage customer centricity at home and abroad to drive sales and profitability, as Sam neatly said a minute ago. First of all, thank you, a big thank you to eShop World for having me on today. And thank you all for taking time out of your busy days, whatever clock and whatever time zone you're on at the moment. Appreciate you making the time to be here. I'm sure you'll find it a good investment of your time. Before I crack on and talk about customer centricity and what it means globally, I want to talk just a little bit about me, just to give you a little bit of context about my background. This was my flashy Mercedes CLK, registration plate W66 for web, WWW for World Wide Web. And my daughter Antonia, when she was a couple of years old, this is way back in sort of 1997, 98. Fast forward, and my daughter is now 25 years of age. I got into digital and e-commerce quite early. Excuse me. Since then, I've gone on and done many things, including writing a couple of books. The first book here on the left-hand side was shortlisted for the Business Book of the Year Awards in 2019. Rather selfishly, they gave the award to someone else. And the second one here on the right-hand side, The Power of Customer Experience, which came out in May 2021. I'm waiting to find out whether or not that's going to be shortlisted for a Business Book Award. We shall see. I also created and deliver a mini MBA in customer centricity with the Oxford College of Marketing and the Oxford College of Leadership and Management. And if you live in the UK, occasionally you'll see my ugly mug popping up on The One Show, other BBC programmes, Sky News, and other such entities. In terms of what I've done in my career, I came down to London 17 years ago to run actually online at Harrods. I also ran online at Burberry. I was the first head of e-commerce in Europe. I ran online at Ted Baker and also at Pentland Brands, which includes Speedo. I set up a consulting business called Practicology, which was then acquired a few years ago by an amazing American business called Pattern. I'm a board advisor to ClearPay. I'm on the board of a great charity called In Kind Direct. I chair the retail arm of the Scouts, and I also have the privilege of chairing an advisory board for the Mayborn Group, and their main brand is called Tommy Tippy. So as you can see, I talk the talk, but I've also walked it. And actually, I was remembering that way back in 2004, I'd actually launched a microsite for the USA, swiftly followed by a microsite for Japan. Apologies for the missing images. This is all I could retrieve from the Wayback Machine. Any of you want to go and look at some old web pages, you can get access to them on the Wayback Machine. So this was the Harrods website in 2004. Obviously, these placeholders did have content on them back at that point in time. So I recognized then how important it was to think big but act local and have a proposition that was going to be relevant for American consumers and Japanese consumers, and that a cookie cutter site and version of our UK website wasn't going to be enough to be relevant to them. Wherever you want to sell in the world, customer centricity is so important. It doesn't take on less significance wherever you go. And I think a lot of this is down to the fact that consumers used to have limited choice. If you go back to 1994, prior to the first e-commerce transaction, you know, we had high street shopping set, we had high street stores, excuse me, we had shopping centres, we had out-of-town retail parks, like here, Dunkin' Donuts opening up next to the Massachusetts State Police Office. Don't know why they did that. Presumably they had a captive audience, boom, boom. So back then it was all about location, location, location. And as consumers, we didn't really hold the balance of power. Then along came Sir Tim Berners-Lee, and he turned that on his head when he invented the World Wide Web in 1989. And in 1994, we had our first transaction of a Sting CD, believe it or not. Some of you probably don't even know what a CD is. 1994 began the democratization of retail because this is what began the game-changing proliferation of choice that we all have today at our fingertips, where we literally have thousands of options. Whenever we want to go in and buy and engage with a brand, we can do it online, obviously, instantaneously, and we have so much choice at our fingertips. In 2007, there was another seismic event, and that is when this man, Steve Jobs, the great man, the founder of Apple, and sadly no longer with us, and one of his partners, Johnny Ives. So Johnny Ives invented the smartphone. And of course, the smartphone has fundamentally changed everything again, hasn't it? Because it's really empowered us as consumers, because we can now buy anything, we can buy it anytime, and we can buy it any place, and we can also buy it from anyone, literally around the world. That's what we have now available to us as consumers. Again, going back to 1994, we had none of that. However, if you're going to be successful and you want to take advantage of this new world that we live in, there are barriers to overcome, particularly when it comes to internationalization. If you find that EU consumers, that live in France and Germany and Italy and other European countries abandon on your checkout, it's highly likely due to the fact that you maybe haven't localized things like currency and payment solutions. And of course, these are just some of the things the e-shop world can help you solve for. But then there's other things like language. Take a look at this video. This is what happens when the language maybe doesn't work out so well.
Das hier ist in meinem Sektor. Das hier ist das wichtigste Gerät des Küstenwächters. Das Gerät und das Überlebensradar.
Mayday, mayday. Hello, can you hear us? Can you hear us? Can you... Okay, over. We are sinking. We are sinking.
Hello? This is the German Coast Guard.
We are sinking. We're sinking.
What are you thinking about?
So an amusing video, I'm sure you'd agree, for Bayret's language services. Just before I go on to talk about Kurt Geiger, just very briefly on that, I'm of course not having a dig at any German that can't speak fluent English. You know, if we're a British brand and we want to go international, I think it's down to us and it's our job to make sure that we make that proposition as relevant as we can for the needs of customers in other markets. And that also includes the language and translation. Of course, some international customers won't buy because delivery costs or the time it takes to get their goods delivered just doesn't look that attractive. And here's the current proposition on the Kurt Geiger website. This is fairly standard. Most brands shipping overseas have a fairly standard, 2 to 5 days at best, or 3 to 7 days, sometimes more at worst, delivery times, and sometimes quite expensive delivery propositions as well. So you have to think about what the implications of that are going to be on the customer experience. And when I drilled into look at some of the terms and conditions and some of the language around it, I also found that there were some barriers in there. The first thing they talked about was currency. All orders are processed in pounds sterling. What does that mean to somebody living in the EU? Does that mean the orders they see on the website are going to be in sterling and not localized to euros or whatever currency they're actually working towards? And then custom charges for countries outside of the EU. All of a sudden the language here that's being used is making me start to feel like this could be really awkward. So even if I speak English, I'm now really questioning whether or not I'm going to make a purchase from Kurt Geiger in the UK if I'm living in a mainland European country. And what about the returns policy? Look at the first couple of lines here. We guarantee to refund any item purchased on kurtgeiger.com that you're not completely satisfied with once it's returned to us in a saleable condition. Well, of course, it's not to be returned in a saleable condition. That makes perfect sense. But within 30 days of receipt, why is it going to take 30 days for me to get my money back? Not everybody has enormous bank accounts, and waiting 30 days for a refund after they've received the goods, again, isn't necessarily the best proposition. And let's not forget that from a logistics and a delivery point of view, wherever you are now, we're living in a world of on-demand delivery. This is gorillas. So there are all these, disruptive delivery propositions that are popping up all over the place. Are telling us we can now order groceries online and have it delivered in 15 minutes. It's madness. You're like thinking, how on earth are they able to do that? Of course, they're working from dark stores. where they have no, you can't walk into the store, they're just using it for fulfillment and they have limited ranges. But these propositions are resetting customer expectations around delivery and around returns and the whole last mile piece. So we have to think about what that means. What about a name? Yeah, what's in a name? Well, there can be quite a lot in a name when you're trying to internationalize and prove your relevance for customers in other markets. If you happen to be in Australia or you've been to Australia, you might know there's something wrong with this thong. And that's because in the UK, we call that a thong. In Australia, they call these thongs. There's probably something wrong with that as well. And what about the States? Well, that is an eraser. It's definitely not a rubber. I don't think I need to show you a picture of the latter, but you know, names actually make a big difference when you go into other markets. In the States, they don't call those pants. We might call them pants or underwear in the UK. That's what they call pants in America. Again, it's incredible how easy it is to get these, what might seem simple things wrong and become a real barrier for customers buying overseas from your brand. You really need to understand cultural nuances as well. This is an example, I won't mention the supermarket, this is an example of a product launch a number of years ago that, as you can probably tell, went badly wrong. It was Pringles Ramadan, celebrating Ramadan Mubarak, and the Pringles had smoky bacon, so not halal and not suitable for the audience that are going to be buying these products at all. And what about when Electrolux went into the States? This was their advertising campaign to demonstrate that their Electrolux products are so powerful that they could literally suck and pull over the Leaning Tower of Pisa. Well, that's all well and good, but nothing sucks like an Electrolux in America. Makes everyone think, crikey, this is a really bad product that nobody would want to buy because it sucks. How do you prioritize markets to go into? Well, first of all, I think it's a good idea if you have an understanding of whether or not consumers in those markets buy from brands outside of their own territory. So do they buy across border? 20% of Japanese consumers buy cross-border, which I guess is why Burberry think it's appropriate to have a localized website, fully localized for the needs of Japanese customers. And what about, do you have brand awareness? I've spoken previously with some of the biggest brands in the world that just assume they can go and open up in a new market that they have no physical presence in and everyone will know them. That's not always the case. But certainly the Chinese brand Shein has done a really good job of opening up in the UK, localizing their proposition and starting to take a lot of market share of that fast fashion sector. And what about your category that you operate in? Did you have a bump due to COVID lockdowns? And if so, what does the real potential look like? This is what e-commerce looks like at a category level around the world. Not surprisingly, fashion is at the top, followed by toys, hobbies and DIY, electronics and media, food and personal care, furniture and appliances. But the key thing to understand is that's what it looks like at the moment, and that might be what it looked like after COVID, but what does it look like once things have kind of calmed down a little bit? Is it still as buoyant as it was prior? And of course, are your most important segments and cohorts of customers, the people you traditionally sell to, are they buying online and in what level of frequency and penetration in the markets that you're thinking of going into? These are just some of the things that I think you need to be thinking about when you're looking at these markets. And again, these are obviously, this is food and drink for eShop World to help you understand all of that. When it comes to customer service, customer experience, and putting the customer at the heart of all you do, most businesses make decisions based on the cost to serve. I talk to a lot of boards, and when I ask them the question, what's keeping you up at night? Often they will say, oh, the cost to serve customers is killing margins. And I know when I hear that comment that unfortunately they're going to be making a lot of the wrong decisions that will have an adverse effect on customer experience. Rather than actually improving profitability, it'll do the opposite. And the reasons for that are, when you think of customers as a cost center rather than a profit center, if I relate it to internationalization now, which we're talking about, you might consider that actually I'm not going to offer the delivery options that customers really want because it costs too much money. Well, guess what? That just becomes a barrier then. Why would you buy? If you have an immediacy or a need to get something quickly, you're not going to buy cross-border unless it can be shipped in a day or two. If it's going to take a week to 10 days or it's quite an ambiguous proposition, you're just not going to do it, are you? So that becomes a barrier. You might not translate the website. As me, I'm using video sort of talked to you earlier, but this has a real impact on the needs of consumers in local markets. Why would we expect them to buy from us if we don't make the effort to prove that we care enough about their business to talk to them in their language? And of course, you might not offer localized payment methods, again, expecting them to just adopt whatever payment method we have in our home market in the UK, the States, or wherever you guys are on from at the moment. That's not going to cut it. Why wouldn't you offer the payment options that people are looking for in their territory and their market? And customer service, let's be honest, most businesses treat customer service like this. We just want it to go away because it's an annoyance. And that really annoys me, because what we're doing is we're saying to customers, we've got your business. We're not really worried about you coming back. Well, we are. We should be focusing on lifetime value. And when you go into international markets, you have to have localized customer service, the right language, the right hours. If you're based in the States and you're selling to customers on the other side of the world, having US time zone customer service isn't going to be relevant for the needs of customers in those markets. So these are just some of the things that end up as bad decisions when we focus on the cost to serve and don't focus on building and maximizing customer lifetime value. A small, relatively amusing, although painful anecdote. You can't see, but I am a bit obsessive over my trousers. I just buy, for work anyway. Outside of work, I wear other things, jeans and whatnot. But for work, I buy these Boss kind of travel pants, that they would say in the States, travel trousers. In the UK, they've got little hidden zips and everything, which is quite neat for credit cards. Anyway, I tried to buy 3 pairs from the Boss website a couple of months ago. And literally, I used my Apple Pay on my phone, which said it had gone through. And instantaneously, I got an error message from the website saying it hadn't worked. So I panicked and I thought, they've taken my money and I'm not going to get the product. So I went online, worked out how I could contact them. It was the weekend and pretty much no one was available. Anyway, I emailed them, I WhatsApped them. WhatsApp, great for service. I tried calling them, I did everything. And I didn't hear back from somebody until Wednesday the following week, which was, number one, pretty bad, given that I'd been contacting them the weekend. And then I got this email. Thanks for your email, Mr. Newman. I've since checked and the order you mentioned hasn't gone through. Therefore, no payment's been taken from our side. If the money's still pending in your account, we recommend you contact Apple Pay customer service. Huh? Really? So what that's doing in my mind is it's actually saying it's not our problem. It's Apple Pay's problem, number one. But number two, even more importantly, if I was running Hugo Boss, which I'm clearly not, but if I was, well, in fact, I'd get my trousers for cheaper, wouldn't I? If I was running Hugo Boss, I'd be horrified at the fact they didn't make an attempt to sell me the 3 pairs of trousers that I told them I so clearly wanted when I contacted them. Why did they make no effort to still sell to me and keep my business? I believe that customer-centric brands see themselves as service providers. Some of you might be old enough to remember many years ago in the car hire industry, Hertz was the clear global market leader. And this is one of the best marketing campaigns that they still run today, Avis, of all time. So it must have been their ad agency, their marketing director came up with this, that Avis is only number 2 in rent-a-cars, so we try harder. In other words, we're not the biggest player, we're not the biggest game in town, but you'll get a better service and experience from us. I just love that. Fast forward to today and go on to the biggest DIY retailer in the United States and North America and Canada, the Home Depot, equivalent to our B&Q in the UK. And look across this, it says here, home services, let us do it for you. I love that, because I'm not a DIY guy. I'm a damage it yourself guy. I'd rather pay someone else to do it before I destroy it and make a mess of it. But look here, free delivery. We deliver curbside, which is great during pandemics. You can search by image or voice. You can see what's in stock and find it fast. And there's free in-store pickup. You can see and there's free financing if you need it. You can see that this is a business that really thinks of itself as a service provider and not just a retailer that's selling products. It's a very different mindset. Amazon, Jeff Bezos, start with the customer and work backwards. I like to start with customer lifetime value, not the top of the funnel. We all know what the return on advertising spend is, but what might we be able to achieve if all of a sudden Martin isn't just worth 3 pairs of Hugo Boss pants or trousers for 300 odd euros? What about if Martin's worth 3,000 euros over the next 5 years because he buys a number of these every year? Would you make more of an effort to deliver the right level of experience for me? Yes, you probably would. Customer-centric brands ensure they turn up where their customers want them to be. I remember Tesla opening up in my nearest shopping centre in North London in Brent Cross. And I've got to be honest with you, I thought, this is a gimmick. what on earth is a car dealership doing, opening up in a shopping centre? And I thought about it and I realized actually what they're doing, which is what they do with their whole proposition, is they're democratizing the car buying experience by taking their brand to the customer and where the customer is, rather than saying to the customer, you need to come to us, we're in a big shed 10 miles out of town. And oh, by the way, you'll be hard sold to by a sales team that don't maybe listen to what your needs really are. So it's a very different proposition and it's much more customer centric. And it's one of the reasons why Tesla has a market capitalization today more than 3 times that of Volkswagen, of General Motors and Ford put together. Customer-centric brands engender trust. Schuh, who are one of the leading footwear retailers in the UK and Europe, you know, this is great. 1 year to return, find out how to return. I remember when they first did this, they've been doing this for over a decade now. They used to call it 360-day returns. And I remember thinking, how on earth are they doing that? But of course, when people return stuff, they do it very, very quickly. They don't sit on their pairs of shoes in a cupboard or put them in a cupboard for 6 months and forget about it. Do you? You return it straight away, either to get the right size, a different product, or to get your money back. But what this does is it reassures customers and it instills trust and belief in them that they could be buying from Schuh in the first place. The great Peter Drucker, was a fantastic strategist, you may have heard this line, said, culture eats strategy for breakfast. And what that really means is you can have the best strategy document in the world. You could have paid one of those big household name consulting businesses millions of pounds for a big third factor strategy document, but it's not worth the paper it's printed on if you don't have the right culture in the business. That will always come before strategy. And I think businesses that understand that are truly customer-centric businesses who start by putting their own people first. They never put their people before profit. As Sir Richard Branson says, put your staff first, your customer second, and your shareholders third. As Timson, for those of you that aren't in the UK, you get your keys cut there, you get your shoes rehealed there or resold. This is their upside down management model. I just love this because you just know, don't you, that in most strategy decks, in most presentations that are doing the rounds at board level, this would be the other way around, wouldn't it? The board, the exec team would be on the top, customers would be on the bottom. And they're saying, no, management, we are here to support all other employees. Excuse me, they're here to support the employees who work with customers because they're our most important people because they have the impact on whether customers buy or not. But actually the most important people we want to think of are our customers because without them, we don't have a business. Home Depot again, they trust their staff with the autonomy to give discounts of $50. Why? Because they don't want them walking out of there and buying big expensive drills or other products elsewhere. Their associates are also able to work with local organizations to give back to their local communities. And they support their people in times of emergency. And they reimburse tuition. They encourage them to go and learn more things that they can bring back to the business. They also put purpose before profit. Patagonia had $10 million of sales on Black Friday last year. Yeah, just last year. And they donate every single cent to saving the planet initiatives of different businesses. That's a business that puts purpose before profit and becomes more profitable as a result of doing that. And brands with a clear sense of purpose, according to Kantar, research enjoyed a 175% increase in their brand value over a 12-year period. That's more than 100% increase above brands that don't have a clear sense of purpose. So this stuff pays. Customer-centric brands recognize that diversity is both morally and commercially the right thing to do. You may or may not know. I know because I've got 3 of them in my house, 4 if I include my dog. I've got 4 women who drive 70 to 80% of all our consumer purchasing decisions. And yet most of our boards of directors look like that. They're pale, they're male, not stale, most likely stale. They're pale, male and stale and not reflective of the customers that they're serving. There are 14 million disabled consumers in the UK. How many of that board had a disability? And over 65 million in the US. And the value of that segment alone, which is called the purple pound or the purple dollar, is over 300 billion pounds in the UK and over 1.5 trillion in the US. What an amazing commercial opportunity for businesses to get this right, never mind the moral imperative of doing it. And of course, we are heading towards conscious consumption, where brands and consumers alike are increasingly becoming aware of the need to not only buy new, but to sometimes buy pre-loved, vintage, secondhand, upcycle products, or even renting. I saw this just before Christmas, where M&S were encouraging people to rent a £299 dress for their Christmas parties rather than buying it. So all the big brands are really starting to think about this. Pre-Christmas again, Asda, one of our leading grocers in the UK, Asda had Gucci products in a pre-loved area in their stores. You'd never have imagined that just a couple of years ago. And of course, customer-centric brands like Nike very much think big. Absolutely, economies of scale, but very much act local. Go into a Nike store anywhere around the world, go online to the Nike store, and you'll find it's a deeply, fully localized proposition around payment methods, translation, and everything else. I believe customer-centric brands understand that a customer is for life and not just for Christmas, same as a pet, same as a dog. According to the Harvard Business Review, a 5% increase in customer retention leads to a 25 to 95% increase in profit. Wow. So a tiny little uplift in customer retention has an enormous game-changing impact on the profitability of a business. Therefore, why wouldn't we focus more on that than we do today? Now, I had the privilege of presenting at an event in Hong Kong many years ago, probably about 5-6 years ago. I was flown over, I was put up in the Mandarin Oriental. If you've not been, incredible hotel. I realized the minute I walked in, I'd never been in a truly high-end hotel because I'd never had an experience like this. From the minute I checked in, the person who checked me in at the reception took me to my room, showed me how everything worked, gave me a card, said, if you need anything, contact me. Anyway, I was going out at night. Just before I went out, tried to watch the telly for half an hour, couldn't get it to work. Told them at reception, came back, this letter was in my bed. Really sorry for the inconvenience. We fixed it. And here's my details in case you have any other problems. And at the end, as I was checking out the hotel, the bellboy, the busboy who took my luggage down, the reception staff and the concierge on the door, they all said to me, Mr. Newman, they knew my name, Mr. Newman, can I just check, you haven't left any valuables in your safe, and you've got your passport, haven't you? And I realized this was a business that I thought and understood end to end what it had to do to be truly customer-centric. Customer-centric brands are people first. They're customer-centric. They're purpose-led. They're diverse and they're inclusive. And they are very much socially responsible. When you do all of that, that builds trust with your customers. Trust drives engagement, and engagement absolutely drives sales. They also measure what really matters. Who cares that conversion rates are 3%? We talk about conversion rates, don't we, in all our trading meetings on a Monday. Is that really the thing that we need to understand? And whether that's up or down? Or would we be better understanding what's happened to the other 97% of customers that didn't buy this week? Because the better we can understand that, the more people we can bring in the first place. So Net Promoter Scores tells us whether somebody would recommend us, and if not, why not? Customer satisfaction does the same thing. If somebody's lapsed, why don't we ask them why they don't buy from us anymore? Customer service issues, they tell us what we need to prioritize fixing in our business. Where people are dropping off on the website through web analytics, that tells us where the barriers are on the customer's path to purchase. Why people are returning, those reasons tell us what's wrong with our products. And what they're actually saying about us on social media to other people like them, their sentiment analysis, that tells us what they really think of us. Customer-centric businesses think about turning customers into fans. It's no longer good enough to have a customer. How do I turn a customer into a fan? One way of doing that is thinking about return on involvement, never mind return on investment. CDLP talk of themselves as being the best underwear brand in the world. I wear their underwear. Very nice, thank you very much. Too much information. This is what I got after my first purchase. A nice little card. They hand wrote my name on and said, here's 10% when you make your next order. Guess what? I immediately went and made another order. How many people do that? It's such a simple little trick that came with my first purchase. During the first lockdown, I bought a couple of pairs of Levi's online. This is what I got, a face mask, a random act of kindness. It wasn't a gift. I didn't know I was going to get it. A random act of kindness. And my local barbers, where I go to get what's left of my haircut, got a haircut tomorrow. Probably shouldn't, should just grow it. This is 4 Greek Cypriot barbers, one barbershop, well over 200,000 followers on Instagram, now delivering training all over the world, created a global brand from one barbershop in Cockfosters in North London. And if they can do that, anyone can do it. Sam, I'm going to hand over to you now for our Q&A.
Thank you, Martin. Fascinating insights into some of those brands there and what they're doing. to what they're doing there. And I love the anecdote about, was it Hong Kong, that hotel you were in?
Yes, the Mandarin Oriental, yeah.
Fantastic.
Never been able to stay in any of those hotels since, by the way, but it was a good experience.
Yeah, one day I hope. Martin, I wanted a couple of questions for you that have occurred to me. I mean, could you give us a few things that you'd look at to gauge the relevance of a new market for brands?
Sure. Well, I think I covered some of that, but, just to maybe reiterate, I think first thing I'd want to know is actually from a consumer behavior point of view, are consumers in that market buying online? Because, we live in the UK, and in the States, we've got people on today. The US and the UK are both very mature online markets. In the UK, we have roughly 26-27% of total retail sales take place online. And in the States, it's about 20 or 21%. Whereas if you go to other markets internationally, it might not be at that level. So I think I'd want to be thinking about, would I prioritize based on, the percentage of people buying online in the first place? I would also be thinking about, is there a propensity for consumers in those markets to buy cross-border? In other words, like the Burberry slide I showed earlier, are they quite comfortable already buying online from an international brand? And of course, we need to work very hard to build that trust and prove to them that we're worthy of their business. And if things go wrong, we'll deal with it properly. And then I'd be thinking about, who am I going to be up against in that market? Who are the local benchmarks? Because it's not just good enough to think big and act local. You've got to think big and act even more local almost than the brands that are actually in those markets. So there will be local benchmark brands who do really well. I'd be looking at them thinking about, what do I need to do to make sure, I can convince somebody to buy from me rather than them. Those are just a few of the things I'd be thinking about.
Thank you. And would you say there are some markets that are easier for others? I know we're in the UK. Perhaps you could just tell us a bit about those.
Sure. Well, again, just going back to even my own experience when I first started, internationalizing at Harrods. I mean, for me, it was obvious at the time because we had a lot of tourists, and most of our tourists were coming from we had three lots of tourists. We had American tourists, we had Japanese tourists, and we had domestic tourists. So I was thinking about, how do I make our proposition, what we sell, how we sell it, more relevant to those different markets. When I fast forward to Ted Baker, I was more focused on going into English language, going into countries initially with an English language website that I thought we could still make work. So Australia, Scandinavia, even although English is not the first spoken language in Scandinavia, the vast majority of Scandinavians speak English pretty well. So I kind of figured, well, actually language is a bit of a low barrier in that market. And maybe if I could get the payment, proposition right, then I could still be really relevant for that market without necessarily, having to translate the website. So it's partly about, where's the size of the prize and what's the complexity that you need to go through in order to make it relevant for the needs of customers in those markets.
Thank you, Martin. Natashia, if I might turn to you. I wanted to ask you if there are maybe 2 or 3 things that brands should do first when they are going into new markets, perhaps things that they can do to help them hit the ground running and have some quick successes, low-hanging fruit, as some people call it.
Yeah, I think Martin covered a fair bit of it, and I think it's just sort of summarizing it again. But first of all, I think, as Martin said, establish that there's a demand in the local market, and if the demand is genuine. And I think you can get a lot of that from looking at local brands, but also through your analytics on your own sites, and then looking at how complex the market is to enter. Following that, I would say, when you're looking at entering the market, think as a customer. Very much like Martin, the whole tone of Martin's discussion today has been, how would you behave and feel if you were on a website and looking at a website outside of your home country? What would you be looking for? You'd be looking for the safety and the comfort of, a local language, local currencies, local payment methods, all the things we'd normally or rationally think about as a customer, but sometimes we don't always think about when we're actually looking at a cross-border solution. Returns is a massive thing. Much like Martin had said, 30 days to get a refund. But how easy is it to manage as a brand, as a customer in a foreign country, to make your label, to get it to the point for it to move back, to see your refund? Does it come back to your normal payment method? Duties and taxes, you know, how does that work? Do I get it back or not? If you're making customers pay the duty and VAT, ideally you're not, and it's DDP, because that goes back to the pricing side of making it nice and clear at checkout that the customer has no nasty surprises later on receiving the goods.
Thanks, some good thoughts there. And I suppose from your time and work at eShop World, are there any markets that show the most demand for UK brands?
I think there's, you know, there's all the usuals, and we're all very much aware of Asia and the growth there. But if you go into our Global Voices survey, which we'll share afterwards, some of the main markets that we're showing for the UK were South Africa, Australia, China, and surprisingly India, unsurprisingly, and the Middle East. So France and Germany are still very strong as well. But again, you need to make sure you have the demand there for the market, and that you're equipped to enter it with all the right tools, and, you know, to be able to enter successfully.
I just want to add something, if you don't mind, Natasha.
Please do.
You know, if I think back to my time running online for Harrods, Burberry, Pentland Brands, Ted Baker, you know, I remember at Burberry, you know, my boss said to me, oh, you know, we want to go into all these other markets. I was like, well, that's great, but you know, I've got a day job, and I've got a small team and not that many resources. It was quite early, and I mean, I was the first head of e-commerce in Europe, so we're quite a small team. But I think these things still happen today, where e-commerce teams are being asked to take a core proposition and make it relevant for the needs of customers in other markets. And I think that often they're either struggling for resources, or they don't necessarily have that local market knowledge. And that's where I think somebody like eShop World comes in, you know. And if I had known about, or if eShop World had been around when I was around in the very early stages of my career, I would have absolutely 100% been engaging eShop World, because it was the type of solution that I would have needed, that would have helped me to be more successful in those markets, rather than scrambling around trying to find somebody that spoke, you know, pidgin Japanese or pidgin German that could answer, you know, customer service queries or whatever it happened to be. So I think it's really important that if you're going to be successful, you need to do it properly. And that's why you need a partner to really help you with that on that journey, in my opinion.
Thank you, Martin. And yes, I think, you know, cross-border partners are one way to sell direct to shoppers. Another way is to use marketplaces. Natasha, perhaps you could just run over some of the pros and cons of marketplaces versus a direct-to-consumer with eShop World.
Yeah, I mean,
proposition.
Yeah, I mean, there definitely are benefits to marketplaces, and I suppose to build up a brand presence or awareness slowly with limited investment. But you know, the big drawback is you're not getting to build your brand. You're not getting to hold on to your customer CRM details and increase build your customer's lifetime value and continue to grow that, and to build the relationship and keep that real feel of what your brand is, versus a bland marketplace where there's lots of other competition being shown up as, have you considered this? Have you considered that? Whereas on your own DTC cross-border website, you'll be presenting your brand and your brand only, and owning that CRM data at the end of the day and experience.
Well, thank you very much. Martin, do you have anything more to add?
No, I don't think so. I just think, you know, we do live in a global village, you know, there's no question of that. But I think that, you know, the headline of the presentation is think big, act local. And I think that applies domestically as much as it does, you know, internationally. Maybe one short anecdote to finish. I often show these slides, but I don't have them. A good friend of mine, Mike Logue, took over a brand called Dreams, who are the largest bed and bedding retailer in the UK and one of the most profitable globally. And when the business was basically bankrupt in 2013, it was sold about 6 months ago for about £600 million, or nearly, well, the best part of $1 billion. But one of the first things he did, when he went out to the stores and he spoke to all the staff and the customers, and he was getting under the skin of what wasn't working and what needed to be improved, he realized there was a big disconnect between the head office and the stores. And he thought, the best way I can remove that is I remove the sense of there being a them and us in the business. And he changed the name of the head office to Bedquarters. from headquarters. And it might sound a little bit flippant and a bit of a marketing play, but culturally it had a massive impact on his colleagues in the business and how they felt, particularly people who were on the front line and were, you know, working on all the different parts of the business. So I think it's a great example of listening to customers, listening to colleagues, doing the right thing, being local. And I think if you do go the extra mile and you make that effort to be as local as you can with the proposition across language, taxes, payments, marketing, and everything else, there's no reason why you can't be successful. You know, I showed you an example of Shein earlier, Chinese brand who a couple of years ago no one had heard of over here, and are about to list in the stock market in the States for $50 billion. So it can be done and it can be scaled to an enormous level, but I think you need to do the right thing and you need to make it relevant for the needs of consumers wherever you're trying to sell to them.
Fantastic. Well, I do hope you all found today's session interesting and can find some ways to think about how to become more customer-centric in your own businesses and to leverage some of the best practices that Martin's talked about there to delight your customers, both new and future. That's a wrap for today's session. It just remains for me to thank Martin and Natashia and everybody else on this call for coming along and spending the time with us. The recording will be shared with you shortly by email, so watch out for that in your inbox. And thanks again, and wishing you every success for what's going to be a very exciting 2022. Good afternoon to you.
Free of COVID.
Thank you.
Cheers, Sam.